I think that S&OP is a continuous work in progress for many companies. I don't want to say it's easy to put in, but it's probably easier to put in and get going than it is to really make it work very well. Before we get into it, I want to tell you a little bit about these 4 characters called everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was asked to do it. Everybody was sure that somebody would do it. And anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. And somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. And everybody knew that anybody could do it, but nobody thought that nobody would do it. And it ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Now, I don't mean to imply that anybody could do the various roles in S&OP, but the point is that S&OP is really helping us structure the accountability for the top of the supply chain functions. Okay. Next view is my vehicle to either work independently with clients or with my network partners. Work on, S&OP is my passion and probably my differentiating skill, but also operation assessments, change implementation, project valuation, and partner selection. I put, many global complex projects together over the years, and I can add value to if you're considering a large project and maybe helping one of the majors. I provide a service where I can help you provide some sanity checks and more details surrounding that. Some of you can see some of the clients that I've had the pleasure to work with over the years, mainly in the chemicals, consumer products, life science, and some high tech. Okay, I guess my real goal is to give you a few, if you walk out of here with a couple tidbits, specific tidbits that you can take back to your process, I'll feel that this was successful. But along the way, I also want to talk a little bit about a methodology for improving your S&OP that starts with a maturity assessment and then measuring and continuing to measure against that as you move forward. And I also want to emphasize how S&OP, I really believe it is the platform for continuous improvement in the company. It touches so many places. Okay, I usually think of S&OP along these dimensions: portfolio review, demand review, supply review, pre-S&OP, and executive S&OP. And as I mentioned, it's reasonable to get it going, but it's hard really to hit the target of excellent performance. We've talked about some of the challenges throughout the last couple days in S&OP. So I won't beleaguer you with asking more questions, but I thought these were funny pictures, so I wanted to put them up. And if you do a Google on "oh shoot," some of these pictures will come up as well as some other funny ones. But I've conducted a survey over the last few months on some of the challenges that people are having with S&OP. And the things that bubbled up to the top were the executive sponsorship, the participation, S&OP design itself, IT support, the content of the meetings, the effectiveness of them, as well as S&OP understanding, and really the KPI use. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, and the results that are coming from it, as well as the underlying processes. And of those things, the respondents cited meeting effectiveness, the results aspect, the design aspect, and some the participation aspect as well. I was a little bit surprised to see the IT support was so low as a challenge, because every time I've entered into this, several times now over the years, it's always been a challenge. I want to talk a little bit more about that as well. If you would like to participate in this survey, I'm going to leave it active on my website for a while longer, so please feel free. Okay, if we think about a methodology for improving our S&OP process, starting with assessing and baselining, where we are and admitting some truth to that. I think Andy spoke about that a little bit this morning. I want to expand upon that a little bit more. Then reviewing what I'm going to call key revitalization levers specific areas that you can attack to try to improve your S&OP. Implementation and improvement of these ideas, I'm not going to really talk about that. That's a big topic in and of itself. And then I want to talk about some techniques for measuring your progress against making improvements. So this is what I call the S&OP Best Practice Performance Arrow. And it's a collection of 27 best practice areas that pertain to S&OP. Behind each one of these boxes, there's 3 or 4 questions, or 10 questions in the case of IT, that are S&OP best practices. And it's one thing that I usually start out with clients, and depending on how it comes out, they come out green, yellow, and red, and it gives them some specific areas to assess where they are and where they are in terms of their maturity along trying to improve their S&OP process. Because everybody hung in there for the 2 days, if you'd like to get onto my website, I have this up, and feel free to answer the questions, and I'll send you back a little drawing like this with some comments on it. Just please, maybe not 50 all at once. I'm a little bit backed up, but I will respond to this for you. Okay. Then what I also like to do is roll up each of those boxes into the 5 categories of design, technology, content, behaviors, and results. And then also benchmark you against what I'm calling the average case. Okay, let's talk about some of these revitalization levers. I call this the molecule slide, but on this I've got vision, sponsorship, design, organizational alignment, reports and tools, technology, KPI use. So if I take vision and sponsorship together, on the left side I've got some key considerations or questions to ask, and on the right side I've got maybe some next steps or some comments. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the vision first. I guess that's the starting point, and I guess the build on the general point that I want to make is that what I would suggest is you write out 6, 8, 10 statements that describe the end state of what you're trying to get to with S&OP. What does really success look like? Because we've been talking about some definitional problems with S&OP and a little bit of confusion in the organization in terms of what it is, and it's not boiling the ocean. It's not solving every little supply chain problem that exists. And in many organizations, people, they gravitate to that. S&OP is going to fix everything, every little tactical problem that comes up. So, once you have this set of 6, 8, 10 statements, you can really tend to build some momentum around that and use it as a communication tool to kind of get everybody on the same page. If it's a project that you're in, you can also communicate specifically to set expectations. What's going to roll out by when? What capability are we really going to have at the end of year 1, and what's going to go into year 2 that we're going to need to do? Because otherwise, people will just jump to, it's solving all problems. Okay. We talked a little bit about this morning about the various functions or drivers from S&OP, or I'm going to call them sponsors of S&OP, and we showed a show of hands as to who's sponsoring S&OP in your organizations. But I wanted to ask, there was one. What about either the general manager, the business unit, or even the CEO? How many of you have that person that you would say is your sponsor in your organization? Anybody? I see a couple. I see 3, one way there in the back, which is good because now I know they can hear me. So three or so. What I've found is that the CEO or the GM of that division in a project situation will often delegate it. Now, that person certainly needs to be the chairperson and owner of the exec S&OP meeting, but I often find that it's delegated. And I guess what I'm going to suggest is that many members on the executive team, or I'll ask you to consider that many members on the executive team would be good candidates, but chances are you probably have the supply chain person on board, and chances are you probably have the production or the operations person on board. So it may make sense, to get more allies, around that table, to think about somebody else, if that's not too risky, if you can do that. And what I'm finding more and more as I'm running through companies doing this is that the CFO is often the right-hand person of the CEO. And more that person is being looked to provide that cross-functional coordination, among some of the operating groups to drive at results. So, more and more, I would suggest that you might think of a high-level financial leader, and this also plays well to trying to integrate the financial plan with the operating plan that we know that S&OP is really all about as well. Okay. Okay. With respect to design, some basic questions to ask. When you're in large companies, multiple divisions, multiple geographies, should we run parallel S&OP processes? Should we have everybody in one? If we're going to run parallel, how do they come together at the top? I mean, all of these questions come up, and typically they're mapped against the org structure and the way that the business reports. And if you're having trouble, I guess if it's an awkward structure for S&OP and you're finding that you have too many owners, if you will, of a specific meeting, then that might say something about your org structure, right? Now, I'm not going to suggest that we always have control to change that, but out of the other side of my mouth, I am going to say that you typically have the leaders of the company involved in this process, and they're the ones that can change the org structure. And it may make sense to do some realignment if you find some awkwardness in your S&OP process. The other thing that I want to emphasize is about the executive S&OP. Should that be a separate meeting? Is it worked into their, what I'm going to call their management system or their systems of meetings and how they operate the business? I've often found that it's easiest to integrate executive S&OP with maybe their monthly staff meeting. Typically they might meet for a day or 4 hours if they're pretty efficient once a month, and a half an hour or up to an hour depending on what the agenda needs to be for them that month. It might be a good idea to try to work that in. These people are hard to get as it is. One of them to try to get them all together is very challenging. So I might think of that. The other thing that I want to stress on this chart is around consistency across divisions. It's easy to say that S&OP should be consistent. Similar planning horizon, similar flow of meetings, a single process. But if finding your organizations, you have a little bit of a different supply chain in one part of the organization, don't try to force it. I guess if there are specific cases, don't force something down the organization that they don't want. Okay, in the tools for the meetings, I'm going to start up there about 11 o'clock with something basic like a meeting charter. It's just a one-pager on what this meeting's about, who's supposed to be in it, what the objectives are, what a typical agenda looks like, key inputs, outputs, this type of thing. It sounds pretty obvious, but over time, all of a sudden, some people start drifting out and other people start drifting in, and the meetings can morph into something else. A charter will help bring everybody back and set expectation, and it's really your license to say, that's an interesting point, but that's not for this meeting. Then your S&OP plan, the reference plan that's used in combination with potentially an exceptions report. Challenge yourself to not make your S&OP plan, have more rows than you actually need. These can get pretty complex, especially, we want to make sure that remember that this is an exception-based meeting, and, highlighting exceptions on something that's complex can be difficult. In some cases, I've worked with some clients that, where we just, put in some logic to pull the exceptions right out, and then we just use the original plan as a backdrop for that. KPI scorecard. Each of the meetings should have a KPI scorecard. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but the KPIs, make sure that they have a baseline, or maybe like a historical average, and a specific target, maybe where you're going to get to. Maybe it's 6, 8, 12 months into the future, and then also how you're going to step from your baseline to your target. Are you going to make it all in 1 month? Are you going to bring forecast accuracy from 72% to 98% in 1 month? Probably not. It's probably going to take several months to get there, some intermediate points. So I would suggest that you devise a scorecard that takes that into consideration. And then an action log. Who's going to do what by when? What key decisions were made. Periodically, I would suggest that you step back and evaluate the effectiveness of the meetings in terms of S&OP best practice, in terms of are we keeping the discussion at the right level over the right period of time. How about the gap management? Are we making decisions around the gap? Are we prepared? Are we setting actions to improve our KPIs? These type of things that could all go on some kind of a meeting effectiveness scorecard. And I would suggest rotating that around the participants in the meeting. And even if they're executives, make them do it. They're the ones that really own this, and they also should participate in some of the improvement of this as well. I often find that pre-S&OP can be a challenging meeting. Maybe there's lots of business units involved in it if you've decided to design your S&OP that way. You certainly have lots of people, lots of opportunity to get into the details, lots of opportunity to have a long meeting, and lots of opportunity to lose people and lose credibility. So with pre-S&OP, a couple things I might suggest. You can try, maybe there's a core group and, some of the other people rotate in and out of the meeting. If by chance you have no imbalances for that month, for the, the horizon that you're looking out after, you have no KPI gaps to address or variances to address, maybe not, don't force it. Maybe that meeting can be done virtually in a summary. I'd be very surprised if that happened a lot, but, it could. The last two bullet points, too, just to spice the meeting up a little bit, I might suggest maybe bringing in an ad hoc improvement topic. Now, the last thing I'm suggesting is turning your pre-S&OP meeting into some kind of a project review meeting. But, a controlled 10 minutes on the agenda, to either celebrate some success that somebody is having somewhere in the supply chain, or give them the floor because they may need input or integrating with some other people. It may be a good idea just to do that. Plus, it might be interesting as well to some of the other people in the meeting. The other thing I might suggest is maybe bringing somebody in from the executive crowd. Rotating, having a rotating, executive team member to sit in on that meeting. That not only shows support, down at the next level, but that person might want to share some parts about the business that would be of interest to the other participants. The other thing too is maybe that person at the next level needs a little bit of education on what's happening with pre-S&OP and the process in general. So those are some things to consider. We talked a little bit about technologies this morning related to supporting S&OP. I've been challenged on most of the implementations associated with this. Don't underestimate this. If you don't have a real clean way of blowing through your product hierarchy up and down and slicing and dicing, especially by the way you report on the business, I would not recommend attempting this on a large scale. Some clients, they want to get into it right away and get a little bit ahead of themselves in this, and if there's that temptation in your organizations, do it in a small part of the business so you can really firsthand understand and feel some of the pain that's involved in putting the data together. Otherwise, your whole team will be working on this, and that won't be sustainable, and it's just going to hurt the credibility. You need a clean single repository. Some of the more advanced functions around scenario modeling, workflow, etc. Some of the tools, what I have found is that they're getting easier to use, they're getting easier to implement. A lot of them don't require a major upfront investment, and they're getting better and providing more value. Okay, with respect to KPIs, I don't know if you've ever heard the SMART KPIs: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-related. I want to talk to you a little bit about this concept of the KPI tree, where KPIs should have linkages above and below. They should kind of flow up in the organization. An example of that might be, you might be looking at inventory turns by location or by business unit. Then you might have the same KPI in a higher level meeting where you'd be looking at the division level or the company level. So they should be linked. It's not always perfect, but that's always the concept I think that you should strive for. Make sure the KPIs are documented all too often. Once it goes into the computer to be auto-generated, we've forgotten how it's calculated or what goes into it. I talked about actuals being measured against a baseline and a monthly plan getting to an overall target that would be out there in the future. In the behavioral part of this, KPIs, they're not personal. It's just in the interest of improving performance. People obviously take them that way. So be firm but supportive. Try to set actions in the action log to improve KPI performance. And two questions that I always advise my clients to ask are, when will we be back on track, and what do we need to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future? They should be both dollars and operational related, especially at the top. Many times I'll still go into companies and they won't really have operational KPIs. They really need both. Okay, yeah, clear owner. Document who the owner is on the documentation of the KPI. Just some basic nuts and bolts, but it's amazing, this clarification of some of these things and how they will drive the effectiveness and accountability throughout the organization. Okay, here's just a brief example of that, and I've thrown in some KPIs for the various meetings, but the real point that I want to make here is that it's okay in some cases to have the same KPI, and maybe a demand review, but then that flows up to either a pre-S&OP or an S&OP or exec S&OP. It's just that it's at a different level in the organization. Obviously, moving up more to a more aggregate level. Higher up you go. Okay. All right. This is the part that I wasn't going to talk about. The implementation and improvements. This is where we're doing it. We're doing the training. We're doing the change management. We're doing the project management, the process improvement, the IT implementation. What I really want to get into is, measuring the progress. So, at the beginning, maybe you did the assessment and the baseline. You got a set of best practices. This is the kind of the maturity curve that I use. It's a 5-stage thing, going from 0 all the way up to 4. So 0 is really not S&OP. We're worried about this week. We're at the SKU level. Basic is things like we're having a cross-functional meeting, some financial involvement. We've got some semblance of a KPI scorecard, and then as you move up, the technology is supporting the decision-making. You're modeling the scenarios. And then, you're doing global S&OP. You've got full integration with the budgeting process, these type of things. And what I would suggest that you do with this is, you put it on a spreadsheet. And for each of the meetings, delineate some criteria for what it's going to take to get from a basic to a functional. And lay that out on a calendar. And this will help you also set expectations with the group, but it also will allow, I think, motivate the group. In order for us to get to a 4, we need to do X, Y, and Z, over the next meeting, and then people will try to do it. It's amazing, what you measure gets attention, and then you can track this over a period of months.
When you say plan of action, is that the company's performance?
No, that's just like a rating. You can see the scores there of like 1 to 4. So, over the year, we're trying to, take a portfolio review from, essentially not having it, to full maturity, as we would describe it by a set of criteria. Okay. Tom Wallace said a little bit about some of the soft aspects of S&OP yesterday in his discussion, and I just wanted to build on that to say that, S&OP really can be the platform for continuous improvement. It really touches all aspects of the company. You get the integrated management reporting. You can manage the KPIs top to bottom through the organization. It brings the voice of the customer into your business. You're developing your next generation of executives many times in these meetings. Clear roles, responsibilities, establishing enterprise-wide priorities. I mean, this really is the the ticket, I think, to enterprise continuous improvement. Okay, so we talked a little bit about assessing and baselining the as-is. We talked about some specific revitalization levers, using some tools to track your maturity, first to evaluate it and then to track it later on, and then also thinking about S&OP in more of a holistic sense in terms of continuous improvement throughout the company. So I'll leave you with a few quotes here. We heard one of them this morning. These are some of my favorite ones. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over and expect different results. That's Albert Einstein. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. Walt Disney. Drive the business or it will drive thee, Benjamin Franklin. And just because something doesn't do what you planned it to do doesn't mean it's useless. Thomas Edison. Thanks very much. Happy to answer any questions if we can or follow up as required. Yes, please.
You talked about a very interesting point, which is making it the S&OP the platform for the continuous improvement. Do you have an industry example for that?
So the question is there an industry example for making S&OP the platform for continuous improvement? And I would say that it applies across the board. I think S&OP transcends many industries, and it's really about the behaviors, the measurement of results, the development of leaders that really every company needs.
So any specific examples or success story the company can do that, and how can be the platform for continuous improvement?
Okay, a little bit of the same question. I mean, I could name off, the last client that I did this was a large wine company, and they were getting to a point where they was still maturing quite a bit, but you know, the team that was in place, I mean, the leadership development that occurred, the focus on results that occurred, you know, these were the things that S&OP brought to the culture of that company. Anything else?
Well, looks like we've made it to the end of our session.
To the end.